Meat plants, we all know now, are epicentres of COVID infection and leave often vulnerable migrant workers at risk, but also leave the communities where they're located at risk. Now, I'm continually finding it bizarre, the answers that you get from every arm of the state in relation to this industry. They're really treated with kid gloves and light touch regulation. And where something as serious as COVID-19 outbreaks are concerned, this remains very difficult to fathom. So recently, I know that Deputy Gino Kenny asked your department and other departments numbers of questions around an outbreak at a meat plant in Clondalkin, and he got only a very cursory reply back from the HSA. I asked your department recently about an outbreak at an APB plant in Cork and was told that you have been assured by the meat industry representatives that where such workers are engaged, they are completely compliant with regulatory requirements. Now, here's the thing. If we haven't learned any lessons at this stage, that we cannot trust at face value the answers from the meat industry, then are we really going to learn them at all? The HSPC produced updated guidelines about a week ago for the meat industry, and they're very useful guidelines. I've read them. They're very useful. There's a lot of good stuff in them. But how do we know that the meat plants are going to enforce them? Can you, for example, tell me that there's been any unannounced inspections of meat plants in the last week since they were published on the 10th of February? In August last, the Health Minister said that there had to be changes and reforms around the practices in meat plants. How do we know they happened? How would the Minister know? Because the industry reps won't tell him the truth. We know from the Migrant Rights Council and from SIPTU and from others that the situation for workers remains very poor, and without a sick pay scheme they remain fairly unprotected, where they cannot take measures when they are sick that would protect them and indeed the communities where they live. So I think at this stage, Minister, we have to do something about the fact that the industry is tooth and nail opposed to a sick pay scheme for these workers, and I would appeal to you to support such a measure. We'll be bringing in a bill soon to try and get that measure moved forward. But I would also say to you that you must behave different to your predecessor that I mentioned. We cannot have ministers being a shrill for the meat industry when there are abuses of workers and indeed of farmers taking place on a large-scale basis, and there is lots of evidence for it. We need to make sure that regulations are enforced and that you stand up to these. So I would appeal to you yet again to ensure that there are unannounced inspections at meat plants, and that all of the regulations are imposed in a very tight manner, and that needs to be proven to us and to all of us who are responsible, not just taking the meat industry at face value when they tell you what they tell you when it turns out not to be true.